Hello and welcome. In today's exciting episode, I am going to make this holly print up into a Vogue 9106.
It's perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Perfect jacket.
So here we have the pattern. It's the Vogue and vintage from 1952, and it's absolutely adorable. I've made this dress a couple of times already, and today I'll be making it in a tiny little holly print, which is very cute. And but I didn't quite have enough fabric, so for the back of the bodice I'm using a Christmas plaid. But I'll pop aside the bodice pieces just for now, and I'll get out these large and unwieldy skirt pieces. Honestly, cutting these out is such a challenge because my workbench is quite thin. But I think even if you're one of those floor troll people and you put it on the cut things out on the ground, then it would still be a massive challenge because, yeah, the slashes go right in and you just have to be really careful about how you hold it. Anyway, it is time to pin the pleats. So, yeah, I just put one on either end just to make sure that those bits are together, and then I sort of go half, then half again and half again. And on the previous one I did, I used box pleats, and I do think that looks absolutely adorable, but I thought in this one I'd do knife pleats. And yeah, so I'm doing knife pleats, and I'm making them all sort of go out. So the left side goes out to the left and the right side goes out to the right. And yeah, and then once I'd pinned them all, then I sewed them all. And yeah, so here it is. This fabric is so cute. I love it to bits. And so now that I've done the front, it is time to do the back. And yeah, I just wanted to do one side just to check if I like them or not. And I do. These are adorable, these pleats. I think maybe next time I'll do knife pleats again, but the other way around, so that the excess sits on the outside rather than sits on the inside, just to see if I like that any better. But this is adorable. Okay, so here we go. It's time to do the back bit and do all the pleats on that. Once again, I pinned, then sewed, then turned it out and checked it, then sewed again to reinforce them and help hold all the pleats down. And then so the next step will be that I have to press everything, which takes forever because you have to sort of make sure that the seam is sitting down the correct way, and you also have to make sure that each pleat gets ironed. It's finally time to sew the sides together. And here we go. The skirt is now done for the moment. So I've just put it on the mannequin so it can start stretching. The bias can start dropping out. And oh yeah, I happened to have this tweed around, and I just think it goes so beautifully, both with the floral one here, but also with the holly. I just think they're delightful together. So yeah, I am now making this Italian tweed up as part of my December makes, hopefully, because I just think that would look so really cute. When I bought this fabric, I was just like, wow. That's a challenge. That is a creative challenge. And yeah, now I've got a couple of dresses. This is the one, I just had that Italian tweed out because I was like trying to plan out the first few months of next year. But I saw it next to this really bold holly print. And I was like, wow, they look good together. And I was like, ooh, I've got lots of holly prints. And so, yeah. And that's why I'm really excited about making that Italian tweed. Anyway, back to this dress. So we have the skirt over on the mannequin, pinned over on the mannequin, hanging, and yeah, getting busy, dropping. And so now it is time to make the bodice. And I did already cut out the bodice, but I forgot to cut out the lining, something for the lining. So I had a choice of orange, green, or
natural, and I don't know, I went with I guess the natural might have looked better, but I decided to go with the green just to spice it up a little. So first thing I do is the little darts at the top of the back, and then I do the bigger darts at the bottom of the back. And once all those are pinned and measured, I set them aside on both the outer and the lining. Next this is the front bodice, and this one's a little bit more tricky, so I just like to get the easy darts out of the way first. So with this one, there's clear markings so there's a marking sort of in the middle and one near the edge, and at the top again there's one sort of in the middle and near the edge. So you pin those. As you can see, I've got the furthest one, that's a notch, the white one, that's a notch, and I've just put another one in the middle. And those two bits are perfectly flat at the seam line. They may look a little like there's some gathering there. There's not. It's just that at the seam line, they match up perfectly. So then between the other 2 points, like the end of the slash and the white one, there's quite a bit that can be gathered. On the previous dress, I just did 2 box pleats, but with this one, I'm just doing 4 little pleats, knife pleats. And yeah, I just think this, so you just make sort of divide it into 4. So you divide it into half and then half again. So you've got 4 sections, and then you just pin each one. And obviously the right side is pinned to mirror the left side. And then as you sew, you use it from the edge in, you use a normal seam allowance grading down to 0 seam allowance. So I just find it easier to actually mark on those last few inches how exactly they're grading in, and that way the left and the right are the same. And also I find it much easier to do the lining one first, that's kind of your practice one, and then do the outer fabric one. And also when I'm doing darts, I know that the modern way of doing darts is you just run machine back and forward at the end. But if you want your vintage dress to look vintage, then I would definitely recommend doing the just sew at once and then tie the knots of the thread way. Because if you go forward, back, then forth, like that's kind of the modern present day way of finishing a seam, then that's something that vintage sewing machines couldn't do. So yeah, even if consciously you don't know what it is, then yeah, subconsciously you'll sort of register that it's a hard seam, which is a modern seam. So yeah, if you can't quite figure out why your dresses don't look vintage enough, that might be it. Anyway, so at the front bodice, I also did a second row of stitching, just because when you slash something so deeply as you have to in the front of the bodice and on the skirts, you just want then you wear that garment, you want it, obviously there's going to be stress on the garment, and you want the tension to be equal across everywhere. You don't want weak points. So yeah, I think it's essential in garments like this that you sort of even out the load. And I also think it's essential to have a lining as well as an outer garment. That way the stress is equal across, it sort of carries across the 2 layers rather than the whole of the stress being on one layer. And so anyway, now that you've sewn them together and you press them and into place, and I press my seams up on the front of the bodice, and with the darts they go inwards, or do whatever, but the pattern says to go inwards. That's the vintage way, but as long as you do it your uniform way, it doesn't really matter. So the next thing to do is sew the shoulder seams together. So the lining back and front, then the outer back and front, and then you press them, and then the next thing is to do the underarm and the side of the bodice. Now finally it is time to do the cuffs. So I just ironed them right side out, flat in half, just because when you do the hand sewing later, it's much easier if you have a clear edge. Then I pin them in to the outer bodice, And there's lots of notches that you have to match up and seam, so that's why there's that many pins. And then you just machine sew them together very carefully because it's quite a narrow sleeve. And then you just turn them out, and you just have to do this step before you pin the bodice outer and the bodice lining together to do the neckline. If you're just doing with the facing, now is the time that you put the facing on. But yeah, as I said, I really do recommend that you do a full bodice lining for this one rather than just using facing. So you just pin them carefully together and make sure that all the seams are sitting correctly. And then you carefully sew it and go around it twice, and then you clip the curves. And if you want to cut down the seam allowance by half, do that. On the previous dresses I have cut down my seam allowance by half, but on this one I left it just because I quite like to leave my seam allowances as much as I can, but I did obviously clip the curves. Next step is to sew the lining to the rest, to the cuff and the outer. So where you already sewed on the cuff, you just basically go over it, machine sew it over again, but this time including the lining layer. Then you fold over the cuff over all those raw seams, and you just hand stitch it on the inside. But also I'm going to pin all these seams, like the shoulder seams, the under bust seams and the side seams. I'm just going to put pins in there and make sure that all the seams are sitting the correct way. And then I'm just going to hand stitch all the layers together so that forever all the seams will always be sitting the correct way, no matter if you some people like to throw their vintage dresses in the machine and give them a rough wash. If you just take the time to hand stitch all your seams into the correct place, then you can it's foolproof. You can wash it roughly and you don't have to worry about, then carefully, painstakingly pressing everything into place. Anyway, so it does take a little bit of time, but I consider that it's worth it. So now that the bodice is done, we have to get the skirt off that's been hanging on the mannequin. Time to unpin that and take it over to the workbench so we can sew these two together. And I really love this. So here it is, and I'll unpin it. And it is time to pin these two together. And then I machine sewed it, and then you do it twice because you want to reinforce the waistline. And then I pushed the seams up into the bodice and then tucked down the lining, and I hand stitched them together, and that way you cover all your raw seams. And here we have the dress. Ta-da! It is so darling. So that's the floral one on the right there. These are the same dress pattern. And here's the seasonal plaid on the back of the bodice. I think it's quite cute, but I can understand why most people would just run out and buy an extra half yard of fabric if they figured out they didn't have enough. But I like it. And So, and here it is with the sash from the red Scandinavian, the first Christmas dress that I made. And I think it looks absolutely darling. And I've also got the 1950s petticoat underneath it. And I just think this is such a good looking dress. And it's so Christmassy. I love it. Well, from far away, it just looks like a really pretty dress, vintage dress. But you can see the holly. If you're up close, you really can see it. And of course, we've got the seasonal plaid on the back. So it's very Christmassy. But from far away, I don't think I'll limit myself to wearing this in December. I think it's probably an all year round dress. And if you wear a cardigan, you really cannot see the seasonal plaid on the back. And obviously for the rest of the year, I'd probably, I like this red belt, but I guess you could just wear a plain green one, or I'm sort of planning on using all my scraps of fabric to make different sashes so that you can sort of use them as belts. And I also wear my hair up in a bun and then wear one of these sashes as a headscarf sort of tied around it. So yeah, I think it'd be fun to have like a couple of dozen of those and just mix and match. But yeah, I'm so happy with the way that this turned out. It's absolutely darling, and it's just the sweetest little print, but it's, yeah, not too much. The plaid, on the other hand, wow, that is, yeah, it's very festive, but I kind of like that it's just on the back there. And oh, I thought you should see it with so this is the dress that I made, the bamboo dress that I made it out of the whole seasonal plaid, and I just used the tiny bit, leftover bit, to make the bodice, the back of the bodice for the dress this 1952 dress. But yeah, and the dress on the left is the red Scandinavian one, so that's where I borrowed the belt from. So here we have the whole family of December dresses, and yeah, I think they look absolutely darling together. It's kind of like those photos where they make all the family wear the matching sweaters. It's kind of variation on that. They're all related somehow. And here it is from the side. I just see, this is why I used the green. You sort of catch the tiniest glimpse of the lining, and I think it's so fun. But most of the time you don't really see it. So it's not in your face, but it's, I don't know, it just sort of adds a layer, and I really like it. So yeah, okay, I suppose I should go and clean up now, because I just got everything out to do this last photo shoot bit at the end. It was like dress ups. So yeah, I've got loads of stuff lying around now, just sort of scattered around. So I was like, oh, and I should show this, and I should show this. But anyway, yeah, I highly recommend this pattern. Cutting out the skirt is an absolute pain. So yeah, if you rush, then no. But if you have a few hours to just cut out this pattern, then yeah, I highly, highly recommend this pattern. It is beautiful. I really enjoy sewing it. You know, some dresses are an absolute chore to sew, and you're like, I've got to do it. You know, once I've done it, then I'll finally have something nice. But yeah, this one is enjoyable to make because I do pleats for those, you know, the slashes in the skirt as well as the pleats on the bust. And I don't know, it's just, you just feel like you're achieving something. Each step of this dress, you really do feel like you're achieving something. Whereas other dresses, sewing patterns, you sort of put together tiny bits and tiny bits and tiny bits, and you never feel like you're actually making any progress. Whereas with this one, yeah, I absolutely love it. Anyway, so I've still got lots of jackets and holly prints by now you've probably seen my December fabric haul, which is basically just Christmas prints or holiday prints. And yeah, that was fun to make. This plaid backing, like the contrast, using contrasting fabric for the bodice, and then so that the dress looks like a top and a skirt. That idea is really growing on me. Like I was just really disappointed that I didn't have enough of the tiny holly fabric to do the entire dress in the tiny holly, because it's just such a lovely, lovely print. But yeah, the idea of a contrasting bodice versus skirt is growing on me. So I might, something to think about. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and yeah, have fun making your own vintage dress.